Exodus journey of 40 years. 40 years from Egypt through the Sinai Desert here to the land of Moab. They find themselves camped across the Jordan River from the Promised Land, the land that God has said He would give to them, the land of Canaan. And while they're camped there, Moses speaks to them. In fact, the entire book of Deuteronomy are the farewell discourses of Moses to the Hebrew people. Scholars believe that book is broken into 3 sermons or 3 speeches that Moses gives to the Hebrew people before he dies and before they enter the Promised Land. In the 4th chapter of those discourses, as I read this morning, Moses says to the people, "Watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them slip from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them." Do not forget. Always remember the things your eyes have seen. Our focus this morning is the power of memory. And around that theme, let me share 4 insights. First of all, this. We lovingly remember our loved ones now deceased. One of the grand gifts that God gives you and God gives me is the gift of memory of our loved ones who've gone on to be with Him. My father died in 1980 of pancreatic cancer at age 62. My mother died 10 years ago at age 86. I have wonderful memories that stir up within me periodically and cause me to pause and reflect and give thanks for my journey with them and them being my parents. And though it's been 36 years since my father died, I still have special memories. I can walk by a picture of him or a picture of my mother and my father and pause for a moment and find myself just absorbed into that experience and into those memories. Sometimes I find myself smiling as I'm looking at a picture. There have been times when I find a tear trickle down my cheek because it brings a more somber memory. But the fact is, one of the grand gifts that you and I have from our Father is the gift of the memory of those who have been a part of our lives in special ways. Our parents, our grandparents, our children, our dearest friends. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have a wonderful litany of remembrance that's found in the Jewish worship book, and here's a part of it. At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too shall live, for they are part of us as we remember them. Secondly, we remember those who've made a real difference in our lives. You've heard me say many times before, none of us are self-made persons. There is not a one of us in this sanctuary, in these 3 services this day, or in any worship place this Sunday morning, who is a self-made person. We are who we are and what we are because of the influence, the encouragement, and the help of other people in our lives. There are none of us who are self-made. One Christian thinker puts it this way when he writes, "Each of us, to one degree or another, has benefited from those who've crossed our path in life and helped us along the way. People who've believed in us, encouraged us, given time and attention to us, been willing to guide us. Never for one moment forget the differences others have made in your life journey and in your life development. Everyone who has ever done a kind deed for us or spoken one word of encouragement to us has entered into the makeup of our character and our thoughts as well as our success." I look back over my life And I did that in preparing for this sermon. And I give thanks to God for the minister at First United Methodist Church in Milan, Tennessee, who saw that God was calling me into the ministry and guided me along that path to Lambeth College so I could respond to that call. I give thanks for 3 professors at Lambeth who undergirded me spiritually and theologically and biblically and helped me begin to be shaped in being the minister God would have me be. I give thanks for 3 professors at Candler School of Theology at Emory University who took me deeper theologically and deeper biblically and deeper intellectually, and who once again helped shape the person I am now as a defined spiritual leader. And I give thanks for the countless laity over the years who've tolerated me, who've encouraged me, who've believed in me, who've let me lead them, who've honored my leadership, and who even sometimes through criticism have helped me become the leader that God needs me to be in His church. I would not be who I am today, and I am far from being the person fully God would have me be, but I would not be who I am today without all those persons who gave me what I needed to be shaped for the steps ahead. And that is true of your life as well. Can you name them today? On this Memorial Day weekend, wouldn't a wonderful practice be to draw forth in your memory some of those names? Perhaps they're living. And perhaps a note or a phone call, some gesture of remembrance. I wrote one of the ministers who was the influence in my early ministry. He was the senior pastor at Bartlett United Methodist Church when I was the associate there. And I wrote Bill just a couple of weeks ago to say to him, thank you so much, Bill, for being patient with me and teaching me and helping me and encouraging me so I could again be all that God wants me to be. I love the way the Apostle Paul puts it in Philippians 1:3 when he says, I thank my God every time I remember you. Remember them. Call them by name. Honor them personally this weekend if they're alive. And give thanks to God for them. Thirdly, we remember God's goodness all the way of our lives. Moses, as they stood there in the land of Moab preparing to enter the promised land, knew there were challenges ahead for the Hebrew people. There were battles to fight. There were conflicts yet to come. There were uncertainties of that particular land. There would be terrain with which they weren't familiar that they would have to handle. Moses knew all of this. And so he says to them, when you face those difficulties, when you enter those challenges, when you're in the midst of those conflicts, do not forget for one moment who has brought you here. Remember what your eyes have already seen, how God has been at work in your journey to this place and this time. You are here because He has been at work in your life. Remember that. Do not forget what God has already done, for that is the God who's at work in your journey right now. You've heard me say many times before that none of us are immune from the vicissitudes of life. You're not promised. I'm not promised. None of us are promised that we'll have a life free of difficulty. None of you are going to be promised from God that your life will be a rose garden. You know that. You've got experiences right now that tell you the truth that none of us have a life free of difficulty and challenge. In those moments, hear the words of Moses. Do not forget the things your eyes have seen. You've seen the doors open, right? Just when they needed open. You've seen strength come to you just when you needed that particular strength. You've seen wisdom come to you just when you needed that particular wisdom. You've seen someone cross your path just when you needed that person with that advice or that counsel to cross your path. You've seen the moments when your spirits were lifted just enough to face the challenge that you face. You've seen the physical resources provided in times of illness that have led toward your healing and your recovery. You've seen all that, right? And so the message is, because you've seen it, you know the God who's with you in the present and the God who will be with you in the future. Never doubt God's divine goodness at work in your life because you have seen Him at work. One of my favorite gospel songs is titled God on the Mountain. Life is easy when you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind like you've never known. But then things change and you're down in the valley. Don't lose hope, for you're never alone. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God of the bad times. And the God of the day is still the God of the night. Don't lose hope, for you're never alone. For the God who has sustained you in the past, as Moses said, is the God who sustains you in the present and in the future. And finally this, we must remember the sacrifices made for our freedom. On this Memorial Day weekend, we must remember the sacrifices made for our freedom. I'm not a veteran. My father was a veteran of World War II. If you've read my devotional from Friday, you know that. My son-in-law Adam is a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. The longer I live, the more I have come to humbly appreciate all that has been done by those who have sacrificed themselves for your well-being and my well-being and the well-being of this country and for the gift of freedom. I know you've seen those television segments where they send somebody out on the street with a question. I saw one just this past week where they sent a reporter out on the street with a microphone and they asked the question, what is Memorial Day really about? And most of the people whom the reporter encountered were in their 20s and 30s. And I was saddened. This is not an indictment on people in their 20s and 30s, but I'll tell you I was saddened. Out of about 20 people that were interviewed by this reporter, I think 2 to 3 had any clue whatsoever what Memorial Day is all about. When I asked who fought in World War II, I think one person got it right. When I asked who fought in the Civil War, a bunch didn't get it right. And one young lady said, I wish I had paid more attention in history class. It's not about paying attention in history class. It's about remembering and giving thanks that there have been those who have put their lives on the line for our freedom and for this country. You don't have to take a history class to come to appreciate that you and I would not be in this sanctuary this morning worshiping so freely if it were not for the sacrifices that have been made and are being made even today. One of our members sent me a piece from the Wall Street Journal, sent this to me on Friday after he had read my devotional. It's titled, The American Dead in Foreign Fields. And this writer talks about making the effort to go to as many of the military cemeteries as he can in Europe and in Asia before he dies so that he can pay tribute to those who have sacrificed and are buried on foreign soil. And he writes, but whatever emotions you may bring to a visit there and take away from it, I promise that you will not soon forget it. You will come away with renewed and strengthened respect for those of your fellow Americans willing to wear the nation's military uniform and to bear the ultimate sacrifice one can make for one's country. If you're a student, you will look with fresh eyes at the few among your classmates in the ROTC, learning, along with their regular studies, how to become officers in America's armed forces. And you will reflect deeply on our nation's role in the world. Whatever our flaws as a people have been in the past and still are today, you will realize, standing there among the thousands of gravestones, that in the sweep of history, ours is a grand nation of which you can and should be proud. We are not a perfect nation. We have made our mistakes. But there is no people on the face of the earth who have sacrificed more for the well-being of humanity in military conflict than the veterans of the United States of America. On this Memorial Day, May we truly remember and give thanks for those, the military servants, who have sacrificed with their families so much. Do not forget. Always remember. Remember lovingly those who have gone on to be with God, and give thanks for the special memories. Remember those who've made a great difference in your life, and with Paul, give thanks for them. Remember the goodness of God that is present in your life every step of the way. He has sustained you in the past, He will sustain you now, and He will sustain you in the future. And remember and give thanks for those who've sacrificed for our country and our freedom. Thanks be to God. Amen. Go ahead.